people usually buy because they feel like the person they want to be when they buy something. They buy something because they want to feel like they're supporting a specific cause, or they want to be the person who goes to the farmer's market or who buys this really fancy car, for example. So I think part of it is identifying what you care about as a company and also what your customers care about, and kind of making that into how the personality can connect with those customers.
Welcome to Calling the Collective, episode 3. This time I had the chance to speak with Malin. Malin is a brand designer with a background in ecology and sustainable development. So she combines those two passions to help companies on a mission to create positive impact to align their mission with their messaging. It's a great conversation. I learned so much about brand design and realized it's far more than just a logo and some color schemes, but really about how you integrate everything that you believe in into your brand and into everything you do as a business. Lastly, Malin doesn't mention this, but she's actually running a 2-week cohort course. I'll leave the link below. It's £150 for the early bird price, and you'll get an opportunity to spend time with Malin in a group format, small groups, and learn to actually implement some of the things that she talks about. So if you're running an impact company, or you want to start one and you want to learn how to integrate some of the things she's talking about into your brand so that you can communicate that with effectiveness, then sign up below. I'll leave the link there. And also, you won't see my face for the rest of the call if you're watching this, because I didn't have my self-view on show. That was an accident, but hey, that's just part of the learning. But I don't think that's something that anyone will be that disappointed about. So enjoy the call and let us know what you think.
First of all, welcome, Malin. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time. I suppose really the nature of today's call is to look at your kind of delve into your experience around branding and design and how that can help companies with their sustainable development and positive impact. That's sort of our overarching purpose. That's obviously the area that you really specialize in. But I thought to get started, we go back to the beginning, and this is kind of the way we've done this for the last previous calls, is why did you get into sustainability? What maybe what was that reason? What was that driving force to get to align this sort of the work that you do with sustainable development? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think it actually started, I grew up on the countryside, and so I was always playing in nature with my friends, and it was like a really big part of my upbringing. And then in the free time, my family went traveling, and it was always about kind of going snorkeling or like experiencing the local food and different cultures and stuff. So I think I always saw the value of being able to have that opportunity to see, how different cultures bring different value and how important nature is. So when I was 14, I did my first like science fair project on the rainforest and deforestation. So I think there's always been kind of like an interest there. And I was really into science. So I did my degree at University of Edinburgh in ecology and sustainability. And so it was really, really fun. And it was a mix of like field work where you got to really like see things in action and talk to people who had been doing this for a really long time and seeing like a lot of changes. But it was also a lot of theoretical work for like what are companies doing, what is the individual person doing, what's the responsibility of governments. And at this time I also met my now husband, and he was studying digital media and design. And I've always loved doing art. I did like ceramics and painting and stuff as a child, so I always had kind of those two sides. And he was noticing that they didn't talk anything about sustainability really. And I was noticing how big of a role companies have, because I think a lot of the burden is always put on like consumers to make the right choices and things like that. But I mean, we only have so much time, and it's really difficult to put yourself and get informed in every single decision that you're making when you're buying something. So I felt like we wanted to help highlight those companies that are doing really good things. And so we kind of joined forces and decided to help companies that were doing something either socially or environmentally positive to communicate those things and grow and hopefully have a good impact. So that was kind of us combining the skills.
Wow, that's incredible. First of all, there's two things there, because one of the things that's consistent or being consistent throughout the other conversations is people have had a sort of an inclination towards this kind of work when they were young, and then they've maybe forgotten about it throughout their sort of, you know, teenage years, like mid-20s, and then kind of got back into it. But it seems that that's not really been the case for you. It's kind of been pretty consistent throughout your life. I don't know if you would confirm, which is quite interesting. But also, so did you start the company with your husband or with your partner at that time, like straight out of uni? Was that like, okay, you'd
We
met?
actually, yeah,
How did that?
yeah,
That's
we
really cool.
started when we both were still in uni. So
Oh
we're born
wow.
the same year, but we both did some traveling and things like that first. So we were starting when we were both in uni, and it was a good way to kind of take the pressure off. Because I think when
Yeah.
you're starting a business, there's obviously the pressure to like make money and get clients really fast.
Yeah.
But the university had an incubator. So we were able to have like free office space and meet other companies that were starting their own business. So it was a really good kind of learning curve. So after classes, we would go there and like meet people and work together and build up like a portfolio and stuff. And we went to sustainability conferences and stuff like that to try to learn.
Wow.
So that was really fun. Yeah.
That's incredible. That was like, sorry, I didn't really. This is why it's good to have like a loose agenda, so I didn't see the conversation going this way. But so did you like how early on to knowing each other did you decide like this is something that we're both passionate about? Let's just start like a company. Like you say, that's such a good idea at uni where there's kind of low risk. I suppose 'cause
Mm.
maybe some people might have a student loan or you've maybe got a bar job and you've kind of got lots of time on your hands. So it's quite a good time to kind of pilot something and try things out. Yeah, so how early on into that journey did you go, let's do this out of interest? That's really cool.
Yeah, I think so we were together probably a year before we started the company.
Mm,
And so it was pretty fast. It was
mm,
2015 that we started the business. And my husband was doing an exchange program in Copenhagen. They have a really good design program there.
yeah.
And so I was visiting, and they had this giant, like, university building with study spaces where it was just a really beautiful building, and it was completely empty on the weekends,
Mm,
which was when I was visiting. So we were sitting, and he was studying stuff, and he was learning about all these really nice principles around branding. And I was doing kind of my studies next to him. And I think we just started to realize, like, connecting those dots, how we both had things we can learn from each other, even though it was really different fields.
mm,
Um, and we got into this field called human-centered design.
yeah.
And so that's something that kind of ties all these things together. And they were doing a bit of a, I guess, like a work experience thing with the
Mm,
program where they worked with big companies. And so he got introduced to how these big companies work with human-centered design to not like enforce what you think that people need, but actually asking communities what they want and
yeah.
trying to problem solve that way. So it was a really interesting creative challenge that I think we both picked up on. So that's when we had that idea together.
Wow, that's incredible. And I suppose just lastly on that, like, how do you, there might be other people that have similar experience work with like their partner. Um, how do you kind of balance that time in terms of like work and personal life? I suppose that's what we were chatting about earlier, like just taking a bit of time off over Christmas. Like, how is there any, I don't know, any tips that you'd give people that are in similar positions? Because I can imagine, yeah, there are other people out there, especially like small businesses, that kind of work in a similar format. What would be your
Hmm.
interest?
I mean, I think at the beginning when we were both doing uni and we were working and stuff, I think that it was definitely easier to work late, especially if you feel like you need more work. It's easy to get stuck into a lot of marketing
Yeah.
and that type of work. I think we always tried to make sure we had a cutoff point and that we made sure that the time that we spent that wasn't work was really quality time.
Mm,
So if we would go out to eat something or if we would watch a movie or go work out together, that it was really like we didn't talk about work then.
yeah.
I think for us, it's always been a bit more about like work-life integration rather
Mm,
than like a balance, because,
yeah.
it may be, we work very differently as people. So sometimes one of us prefers to work late or early, or so it was nice to be able to, let's say, go to the gym during the day and then maybe work a little later. So just
Yeah.
having like a schedule that continuously was revisited and that we could both feel comfortable with.
Mm,
I guess I always found it easier to work with a partner than someone that was maybe like a friend or an acquaintance, because you're already used to being good at communicating together.
yeah.
So I always thought that was good. But now that we have a 2-year-old, it's been really good in that way, because you do get quite a regimented schedule for,
Yeah.
okay, well, there's a cutoff point, the kid comes
Yeah.
home,
Quite
So
literally. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe you're not in control of that cutoff point as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you have to be very open to going with the flow of it. Yeah.
how would you, what is the sort of, what would you say, like, for anyone that doesn't know, like, what is, you've obviously mentioned like the power of, I suppose, the combining your skill sets and from your background, kind of ecology, and then your partner's background in brand design. Like, how would you, to someone that doesn't know what brand design is, like, how would you describe that? Like, what is it? And why did you, you've maybe touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but why did you decide to kind of align those paths? Like, where did you see the power in branding and the potential to maybe influence and communicate the ecological message and environmental crisis through branding? I don't know. That's quite a big question, but yeah, I'll hand it over to you
I'll
to
give it a try.
decipher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people think of branding, it's really easy to think of like logos and website design and color schemes and things like that.
Mm,
And I think as that is definitely part of it, but really it's kind of your company's reputation.
mm,
So I think a brand is how you're being seen by the people who work at your company and your customers and people who hear about you from their friend. And
mm,
so part of that is something that you can control by, you can do marketing efforts and you can create a nice design, but
mm,
ultimately it has to be founded in what your company actually stands for and what you actually follow through with.
mm,
And so I think that's why we were really interested in this whole part about sustainability, because really you have to start with the strategy of what is actually important in the company,
yeah.
and then not just have like a mission statement and that's the end of it, but really
Yeah.
try to see how it follows through in every part of the business, so that you're really having that impact in like every interaction and every part of your business.
Mm,
And so what we do when we work with branding is that we always start with the strategy and then we work on implementation. So that can be anything from like, how do you talk to someone in customer service, to how does your packaging look, or which different events do you attend. So it's kind of like that through line of how do you present yourself and what do you do to make that vision come to life, kind of.
yeah. And then would you do a lot of work around kind of figuring out what people's values are or what the company's values are to really kind of embed that? Like you say, it's more than just, like you say, a lot of people might think branding, okay, a logo, web design, color scheme. But like you've touched on there, it's so much more, it's so much deeper to that than that. And a lot of people talk about like your personal brand. And when they talk about that, I don't think there's a reference to a logo. It's more about your personal brand, from my understanding, is always about like how you are as an individual, the way you interact with
Mhm.
people. So that seems kind of aligned to what you're saying. So yeah, I suppose, would you do a lot of work around helping a company find what they really value, what's meaningful to them, and how do you go about doing that? Like, how do you help someone discover their values?
Yeah, I think because if you want to have a successful brand, you kind of have to have like a three-step process. The first one is you need to figure out what your mission is and what you stand for and who
Right.
you're helping. And then you need to effectively communicate that, which is where a lot of people have a hard time, I think.
Mm,
And then in the end, you can get support from those people that you want to interact with. But in order to get that support and build your impact and get sales, you have to have that way of communicating what you're doing.
mm,
And I think a lot of people do the really hard work of, building a business that is working, that is sustainable, that has great values, has a great work culture. But it's easy to think, well, we know exactly how amazing we are, but it's really difficult to communicate that on a
mm,
bigger scale.
mm,
And so what we do when we work with companies on branding is we always start by identifying what's important to them as one part, but
mm,
also really identifying what's important to their customers.
mm,
So I think companies usually have an idea, and sometimes you even have data
mm,
for like sales and demographics and things like that. But we want to be a kind of independent unit and verify those things, so that
mm,
we can see if there's a gap, if competitors are missing something that they could be taking advantage of. Maybe there's a group of people that really would like help with this problem solving but haven't really been addressed.
mm,
Or maybe there's an emotional way that we can connect with people that they haven't thought of. I think people are very focused on features, and so what we try to do is connect with what people want on a more emotional level.
mm,
um, because I think when you're thinking about a good ad that you actually remember or that you actually thought was funny, that
mm.
kind of aspect of personality of a brand
Yeah.
people usually buy because they feel like the person they want to be when they buy something. They buy something because they want to feel like they're supporting a specific cause, or they want to be the person who goes to the farmer's market or who buys this really fancy car, for example. So I think part of it is identifying what you care about as a company, and also what your customers care about, and kind of making that into how the personality can connect with those customers.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah. So sort of aligning what's important to you and what's important with your customers, and then communicating and saying, hey, this is important to us, but it's also important to you, and then let's work together. Yeah. That's you've put that so simply. I mean, it's really complex, but you've put it in such a simple way. Because I was thinking even yesterday, there's another sort of streaming platform, or not streaming platform, like an alternative to Zoom, called Butter, which I used last week for the first time. And anyway, I used it yesterday. I was trying it out with people, and after the call, it said, like, how good was that call? Give us some feedback. So I kind of did the rating thing, and then a little message popped up to offer some feedback. So I just put in, something like, I wasn't being serious at all. I just said it was as smooth as butter or whatever. And then I got a reply later on that evening from the team, and they just sent through like a GIF of this person like dancing, and I was like, that's so cool. Like, it's just, I found it like I was taking the mic. They've obviously realized that, and I've come back with like a funny GIF, and I was like, that's brilliant. Whereas, like, I don't know, maybe with Zoom you might not get that, or they might have a different approach because they don't value necessarily humor, or they're more kind of corporate, more formal. So that's really interesting, that kind of I value like maybe a sense of humor, a sense of ease, creativity, and it kind of, that's a really tangible, the way you've kind of described that really sort of struck a chord with that experience yesterday. So yeah.
I love that example. I think it's something that we see more from like smaller teams and smaller startups.
Yeah.
And the really tricky bit, I think, is to either create that personality, and it shouldn't be like something fake. It should be something that is genuinely coming from the company, but trying to create that if it doesn't exist, or maintaining it as you grow. I think those two are like really big challenges. That really means that you can't just have that one mission statement. You have to like talk to the people in the company, and how do people like working, and letting them have that outlet to not feel restrained, to not dare to send that funny gift to you. Like, you have to have that freedom in the company to really embrace the whole personality.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's what I was going to ask you earlier about. It's around communication, but you've kind of linked back onto that. Is with your partner, you must feel like really psychologically safe, in the sense that you can both kind of tell each other exactly what you think. And similarly, in a company, as you say, it's probably much easier as a startup or a smaller team. But as you grow that, if people feel psychologically safe to kind of act and make what they feel is the right decision, then effectively, regardless of size, as long as people feel like, if I can send this gift, even if I'm in a huge company, I know that I'm not going to be punished if I've gone against company rules by accident. So that sense of psychological safety is so important. That must be something that I imagine you as a team have quite strongly because of your relationship, but also, like you say, how do you kind of expand that into a bigger team is so important. How do you make sure that people in a team feel safe to act on their own accord and make the right decision that they feel? I don't know if that was a question, but I don't know if
but I think it's one of those things where it's really easy to have your own perspective on what you need to feel psychologically safe, and then think that that's what everyone needs, so that's how the company is run. And I think it's always useful to ask people and give them a way to maybe give anonymous, especially if you're in a bigger company, an anonymous way to explain how they could have a better work experience and how they prefer to work. And I think now also, when a lot of people are starting to work from home, or we're having a lot more digital meetings, we've noticed how much time is actually going to like things that maybe we didn't have to have that Monday meeting, or maybe we didn't have to have, so I think trying to get to the bottom of how people enjoy work in the best way possible is also part of that sustainability, in a way, creating a business that attracts people that are excited about the job and who feel happy at work and who would tell that to their friends. It's also part of the branding in that way, that if you want to look up a company and you see really horrible reviews from people who are employees there, it doesn't really build a very good brand image. So
that's so true, and that's part of your brand as well. it's so like, it's such a huge topic. Then you've kind of really opened my mind to, I probably, I suppose I maybe had a sense that it was bigger, but I was probably in that guilty of that logo, web design, color scheme. But actually it is pretty much, it's like culture, it's leadership, it's all these things, combined. And it's so true, you mentioned there about like different people might have different feelings in terms of how they can act in a company. And but one of the tools that we use a lot is it's a tool called Spotlight, which is like a psychometric tool to understand how people act and feel different. But even for the project that we're all doing tomorrow, like I noticed some people in the group chat we created, like some people asking, what about some detail on this? And that's great, because it's like people are coming at that from a different, like they might need a bit more logic behind what they're doing or a bit more detail, whereas I'm not a detailed person at all. So it's like I don't necessarily need that, but some people in the team that we're working together tomorrow might need that. So it's me kind of going, right, I need to be more detailed, let's put together a script, this is kind of what we're going to follow. So I think being so conscious that people have different behavioral styles and different mindsets in a company is so important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also like you say, just as much as branding is a big topic, sustainability is like such a giant overarching thing that I think when you're also picking the things that you want to focus on in terms of, well, both what your business is doing and the impact that you're having, but also what parts you want to communicate most. It can also be up to where your company could actually have the biggest impact, because, maybe that's the social aspect, maybe it's an environmental aspect. And there are so many, chunks in both of those sections that I think it also can feel intimidating for people. I'm sure you've heard this too, where people are worried to talk about their sustainability because they feel like they're not perfect in every area. And it really honestly builds so much more trust when people are saying, this is what we're working on and this is what we have left to tackle. So I think that is something that I really, if people can, bring something with them, is like, it's better to start communicating openly and honestly about the sustainability that you have and the efforts that you're making, even if you're not like fully there, because honestly, we can never fully be sustainable in the type of setup that we have. So
that's so true, actually. That kind of principle of just honest communication, being completely authentic, is so powerful, for your brand, but also for the sustainable development and the impact of your company. Saying, we haven't figured out how much water usage we're contributing to yet, but we have figured out, or we've placed a ban on single-use plastic in our office. Right, sweet, cool. At least you're being honest, rather than saying, oh yeah, we've got all this sorted. Well, you don't, because it's not, and then it builds trust. That's kind of the key here, isn't it? Really, I think it's probably a key thread. I suppose a question then is, what would you say makes a powerful brand? What examples have you got where companies are really doing this, and what are the key differences between them and the ones that you maybe notice are struggling? What are those characteristics that people can maybe identify when they're looking at their own brand, their own company, and also looking at others?
I mean, I think we've touched upon some of these before, but I think there are like 4 different things that I think are really good places to look for a good brand. So the first one is that it's about the customer and not like just about the company. So people really want to focus on, well, my vacuum cleaner is this much better at vacuuming up dust, but really people are looking for, well, it's more freedom because it's cordless, so it's easier to clean around all the toys, in the sofa. So trying to have that connection with the customer's actual emotional lives and things like that are usually more important than the founder's personal story or things like that. And I think they can still be super important, the story, as long as it's told in a way that is relatable to the customer. So one example is like Brewdog, for example. They have this story about how they name all the beers when they're having like a fun night out. I think that's a good story because the people that they're targeting are really people that would like to also go out with them and have a fun time. So I think that's why that kind of story works. So that would be like my first thing to look for. The second one is that it's true, so that what the brand story that you're telling is really what you're living by. And so if you're having those sustainability values, if you're having that culture, that's something that can be reflected rather than making up a really nice statement and some cool photos on your website, because that really it always gets revealed with social media and experiences and things. People always kind of find out in the end. So I think having that truly reflected, so if you're not where you want to be, you can work on that as well, and that's part of your branding. Then the next thing I would say is like, I think you mentioned this personality aspect when you were talking about them sending the GIF and stuff. And I think this is where a lot of people, they miss out, because if you're looking at packaging for, let's say, Innocent or something like that, they really have so much personality. And it doesn't have to be a personality that's like funny and quirky. It can be a personality that just fits, you know, if you're looking at a lawyer and a kids toy brand, they're going to have different personalities. But like how we're building that personality so that people can relate to that. And that would be like my third one. And then the last one is just to like fully integrate it so that it's in every part of your business. So anything like from how people fill out a newsletter, or how they, you know, talk to customer service, or how your packaging looks, that it's just part of everything and not just like those few things that you've originally thought about.
Wow. And anything more, or that, I mean, there are four.
I mean, I think one example when we're talking about brands who are doing it well and not well, I think Innocent is actually an interesting case study for both. Because they did so much to build up their brand image, being, you know, this company that the founders were really central to it, and they did all this work with their charity work and with their kind of supply chain for ingredients and things to be a really trusted brand. And then Coca-Cola became a big investor, and that really kind of eroded a lot of the trust. But then they also did a lot of work to rebuild that trust in different ways. So I think it's an interesting case study of how we continuously have to work on the brand, and how each decision that we're making can kind of have an impact on the whole picture.
Yeah, that's so true. I know Brewlog would be another example of that, right? Where they're doing, you know, they're being pretty vocal about their environmental work in terms of what they're trying to do. That, you know, they put out the goal to be the most sustainable drinks company in the world. And yet, like, obviously their founder's been in the media for not so positive news, you know, around kind of his, you know, personal life, whatever. So yeah, and it just shows that kind of integrating it into everything you do, but also like, it is that kind of progress and kind of putting your hand up and going, yeah, we messed up there, and this is what we're doing to solve that. And just that, I suppose, being honest, transparent all the time is probably the key to helping you along to implement those 4 or 5 things that you said. Would you, I don't know if you would say that's kind of the thread that maybe helps underpin those. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think, like you're saying, honesty and being open and admitting when you did something that wasn't aligned with what your values are. Yeah,
it's key. Maybe the UK government could learn a few things from you on that.
I think a lot of governments could.
I suppose with those kind of, you spoke about 4 different areas there. How do you kind of implement those, or do you have any kind of guides or any written stuff where people could kind of look at it and go, okay, this is how I can start to do this in my own company, or any tools that you use to make sure that your brand and your values are embedded throughout? You do like a checklist or something? I don't know, is there anything out there that you kind of use and support people with?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, usually when we meet with people, we have a discovery call as the first thing. And so if people are interested, they can do like a free session with us where we just talk through their business and how they see their brand and what they're looking to do. And that can usually help unearth a lot of those different touch points where they want their brand to be more clear. We also have a blog on our website where we have a lot of articles about it. So if people want to go and narrow down on like brand strategy or how to create a good brand guide that people can use day to day, we have topics like that they can explore. So that's at future-forum.co. So I think visiting the blog is always a good idea if you want to get a checklist, or if you just have a question, you can get in touch with me directly as well. I'm happy to help with that. Yeah, I think the first thing I would always advise to do is just to look at if you have a clear image of what it is that you want to communicate, like what your core purpose is, what your impact is, and if you really truly know your customers. And then once you have that image clear, then you can look at all those different things, like, do we have packaging? What's our email signature like? And really look at all those different points and see how you can create that unified image across all those different interactions.
Right. And just to kind of wrap up then, what would be the one thing that you would say to a company or advice to kind of get started on this? Where would be the one place we go, regardless of like budget, size, whatever? What would be the one thing that you would advise they do? Sorry, let's go for that. What would be the one thing you would advise they do to start implementing some of the stuff that you've been saying today into their company?
I mean, I think you need to understand who you're helping. I think that's the biggest thing, and why you. So most companies are starting for a very specific reason, that you're solving a very specific problem for a type of person. And I think that's usually where it ties together with how can sustainability fit into that. And I think how deep you go on that really depends on how far on that journey you are. If you have thought about sustainability a lot, maybe in your day-to-day life, you might have more tools to use. But I think trying to see it in a holistic picture where we can think about how we treat people and how it works with the whole circular aspect of things. So it's not just like, oh, how can we make our packaging a little more sustainable, but how can we collect packaging so that it can be reused, or, you know, that whole aspect of it. So I think the first thing to start with is start where you already are at, and think about little steps that you can start taking to start making your business truly more sustainable, and then sharing that continuously throughout. So one strategy I've seen, which is really good, is to do like an annual report, or to do like one thing that you share every month, which is around your sustainability work, or something that you learned that you're going to be implementing next year. So that you're having that continuous conversation with people, because I think what we often get stuck in is we do lots of great work behind the scenes, and then it's like a giant announcement when we succeeded with our plan. And I think for building a successful brand around sustainability, we need to build that continuous trust of showing that we're always working on it and we're always improving. And so having that direct communication in a consistent way is really good. And I mean, it's up to you how you want to do that. If it's like, sharing once a week or once a month, or an annual review or something like that, maybe.
I love that. And I think just tying into kind of but maybe get your thoughts on this just lastly, but tying into what we've been talking about today a little bit around, you know, progress over perfection. That's been a kind of theme that's come through this, trust and transparency. I don't know if I've not seen this. I say this because I just finished a sustainability report. And in the report we had positive actions, which was a list of things that the company were doing really well, and considerations, which is kind of where to go next, things to consider. On kind of what you've been saying, I wonder if there's kind of that scope potentially, if companies wanted to do this, where they could actually share, whether it's in a newsletter and a video and a post. This is stuff that we've been doing that's really well, and these are things that we've noticed that we actually need to improve on, and we're going to consider doing. I don't know, from a branding perspective, do you think that would be effective, or do you think that could? I suppose it all depends how you communicate it and how you get it across. Yeah, what would be your thoughts on doing stuff like that, where you're actually saying, hey, this is what we're doing really well, but this is also where we're going to improve and consider. I mean, companies probably do that in an annual report, but do they do it on a, like you say, on a consistent basis? I don't know. I've not really seen that. What do you think of that?
I mean, we worked with one example where they have packaging for drinks, and the first step was to make the whole packaging, including the cap, recyclable. But they eventually wanted to do it in a specific type of material that has a lot less environmental impact. But to do that, they had to order a much larger quantity. So they weren't able to actually do that at the size they were. And so they basically were posting about how this is what we've done so far. It's fully recyclable. This is how you can recycle it. And then this is when we get to the size, this is what we're going to do then. So that you have a kind of explanation for why you're not as good as you want to be, but you're still showing that you've done your research and you know where you want to go. And so I think that could be an example of that. That was really effective.
Definitely. Brilliant. Wow. Okay. That's great. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really cool. Some really themes that have emerged, which hopefully people will find useful. And to get in touch with you, as you mentioned, I'll put all the kind of details in the kind of link or whatever as well. And one thing that I've learned from this, in the spirit of being transparent, is from the moment we started talking, I was like, that branding, design, how things look and feel. You were talking about having a studio. Obviously, I'm calling you from home today, but see, for the next couple of days, we've got a shared office space. They have a lovely like backdrop, which is not fake. It's a real one. So I'm definitely going in there from now on to do these videos, because you've got an amazing backdrop with your plant there. It's just the design of your layout is lovely. So I've learned that today from this call, if anything.
No, that's nice. I mean, I think it's one of those things where you mentioned like a personal brand and how people see personal brands versus the company brand.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways we can use a lot of the things that we have from the personal brand, because that is a lot more about personality and character rather than just like the logo and the colors.
True.
So that's something I've taken away as well, that that is a really good way, as a way to maybe explain it, because people are more familiar with personal branding.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, that's very true. Absolutely. Lovely. Okay, well, Malin, have a lovely day, and we will catch up soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. If you got this far, I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I hope that you got as much lessons as I did from Malin. It was incredible to hear someone that really is passionate about what they're doing and is passionate about sustainability, to combine those two things. Like I said, she's running a 2-week cohort course. Links below if you want to sign up. Also, if you're interested in anything else we're doing or want to listen to some of the other episodes, then feel free to check us out at sustainablepathways.com. In the meantime, take care and all the best. Thank you.